Greetings, children, and welcome back to another fun hour of trigonometry. Okay, I'll keep it less than an hour, but let's take a look. Today we're talking about finding the sine, and sine is one of our three main trig functions. Trig is just short for trigonometry, so the sine, S-I-N-E. Sine, we have cosine, and tangent. Abbreviated, those are SIN for sine, COS for cosine, and TAN for tangent. So most of the time you'll see them written like that, sine, cosine, and tangent. Now, when we're trying to find sine, we're trying to find a ratio, which we can write as a fraction or a decimal, a ratio that uses specific sides of the triangle when we're talking about a specific angle. So we don't just say sine of this triangle, we have to say sine of an angle. For example, we might say sine of A. So sine of A, but sine of B is different. So sine of A says in reference to angle A, sine of B means sine in reference to angle B. So let's take a look at how we find sine. First, we need to talk about the different sides of the triangle. We already said that this side, the side opposite the right angle, is called the hypotenuse. And then, depending on which angle you're talking about, you have the two legs. One of them we call the adjacent leg, and the other one the opposite leg. So let's say that we're talking about angle A here, this angle. Well, if we're talking about A, then the leg that's adjacent to it is the one that's right beside it. Remember, this is just a leg. This other one's a leg. But the leg that's right beside A is the adjacent leg. Adjacent means right beside. So, of course, adjacent leg. And then the opposite one is the one that's further away. So that's the opposite leg. So we have the hypotenuse, the adjacent leg, and the opposite leg. Now, of course, if we're talking about angle B, this would be opposite and this would be adjacent. They would swap. Because this is the one that's right beside B, this is the one that's farther away. It's opposite angle B. Excuse me. So, sine is a ratio, we said it's a ratio, a fraction, of the opposite leg over the hypotenuse. So, opposite over hypotenuse. And a lot of times you'll see it abbreviated, sine equals opposite, OPP, over hypotenuse, HYP. Or you might even see it abbreviated as SOH, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So I have some numbers on here, so let's take a look at those. So let's say we just have sine is opposite over hypotenuse, and we're looking specifically at sine of angle A. Okay, so opposite over hypotenuse, here's the opposite leg, 4, and the hypotenuse is 5. So sine of angle A is equal to 4/5. Now, in your homework, it says write it as a fraction. There's it as a fraction that's reduced. This one's already reduced. And write it as a decimal. So hopefully you remember that 4/5 is 0.8 as a decimal. 0.8. All right, let's talk about sine of angle B. So if we're talking about angle B, then this is the adjacent leg, and this is the opposite leg. So sine of angle B then, in this triangle, is going to be 3, the opposite leg, over 5, the hypotenuse. Notice the hypotenuse doesn't change. So sine of angle B, if we write it as a decimal, is going to be 0.6. So that's our introduction to sine. Sine, like we said, is a trig function. It says, in reference to a specific angle, give the ratio of the following two sides, the opposite leg over the hypotenuse. Okay? Now, if we have an angle measure, we can also find sine. And there's different ways to do it. One way is using a calculator, but instead of using a calculator, we're going to be using a table that's in the back of your book. So there's a table, and that table is on page 420, and it says trigonometric ratios. And it gives all the angle measures from 1 to 90, and then 3 columns, sine, cosine, and tangent. So today we're talking about sine. So for example, if I said find sine of 21 degrees, you would go down to 21, and then go over to find the decimal for sine, and it says that is 0.358. Let's look up another one. Let's do sine of 50. That's 0.766. All right, what about sine of 10? Sine of 10 degrees is 0.174. So you can see this table is pretty straightforward to use. You just look up the angle, and then you need to know which trig function you're using. Here we're using sine today. So sine of a specific angle gives you a decimal. Just like here, if we said sine of A, we got a ratio of the sides, and we could change it to a decimal. So we didn't know the measure of the angle, but we could kind of figure it out from there, actually. So that's it for today. Remember, sine is the opposite over the hypotenuse. If you need to find sine of a specific angle, look it up at the back of your book, page 420. Thanks. Have a great day.